The camera flashes hit Victoria Ashford like physical blows, each burst of light capturing the moment her carefully constructed world chose to shatter on purpose. She stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton Cleveland, 32 years old, and worth $4.2 billion on paper, wearing a midnight blue Armani suit that cost more than most people earned in 3 months. Her platinum hair was pulled back in the severe bob that had become her signature, the style that made investors take her seriously when she'd inherited her father's tech empire at 28. The microphones bristled before her like accusatory fingers. Her voice came out steady, controlled, each word measured with the precision that had made her legendary in boardrooms across 3 continents. "I'm in love with Marcus Holloway, my driver, my partner, my choice." Oh. The room exploded. Questions shouted over each other, cameras clicking in a frenzy, reporters surging forward against the velvet ropes. The CEO of Ashford Technologies had just confirmed what the tabloids had been speculating for 2 weeks, and the feeding frenzy had only begun. Victoria's ice blue eyes found him in the back of the room. Marcus Holloway stood in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that Joanna had insisted he wear, his 6-foot frame radiating the quiet dignity that had first caught Victoria's attention months ago. His dark skin gleamed under the harsh lights, his close-cropped hair graying slightly at the temples in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. At 34, he carried himself with the bearing of someone who had survived too much to be intimidated by cameras and questions. Beside him, a small hand gripped his larger one. Sienna Holloway, 7 years old, wore a purple dress that matched the butterfly clips in her carefully braided hair. Her gap-toothed smile was visible even from the podium as she looked up at her father with absolute trust. The little girl's voice carried in a moment of relative quiet, pitched just loud enough for the front row of reporters to catch. "Bigger than the sky, Daddy." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his response came soft and sure. "Bigger than the sky, sweet girl." The screen went black. White letters appeared 4 months earlier. November rain hammered the windows of the one-bedroom apartment in Cleveland's Richmond district with the kind of relentless fury that made Marcus Holloway think God was trying to wash the world clean and failing. He stood at the kitchen counter at 4:30 in the morning, the coffee maker gurgling its familiar song, watching the eviction notice on the refrigerator door flutter in the breeze from the cracked windowsill. 8 days. That's what the bright orange paper said in letters designed to shame. 8 days to come up with $925, or he and Sienna would be on the street. The apartment was small enough that he could see Sienna's sleeping form from where he stood, her body curled in his bed because they'd sold her bedroom furniture 6 months ago when the savings ran out. Her butterfly nightlight cast dancing shadows on the wall, the cheap plastic thing from the dollar store creating magic for a child who still believed the world was good, despite every piece of evidence to the contrary. Marcus's wife, Natalie, had died bringing Sienna into the world 4 years ago, her heart giving out from complications the doctors swore were unforeseeable, and he'd been alone ever since. The thought came and went in a single breath, the way he'd trained himself to handle grief. Forward motion, always forward motion. His phone showed a bank balance of $94.37. The coffee in his hand cost him 79 cents when he bought the cheap store brand. He did the math automatically, the accountant's brain that used to track millions now counting pennies like they were diamonds. Mercer & Associates had let him go 9 months ago, senior accountant, 8 years with the firm, consistently top performer in his division. None of it mattered when the recession hit and the partners decided to cut 30% of staff to protect their own bonuses. Marcus had understood the math even as it destroyed him. 68 job applications since then, 3 interviews, 0 offers, 2 experienced for entry-level positions, 2 long unemployed for senior roles. The gap in his resume screamed desperation to hiring managers who could afford to be choosy. The job posting sat on his phone, the screen cracked from when he dropped it last month and couldn't afford the repair. Executive driver, Ashford Technologies, $120,000 annually. Warning, demanding employer. Previous 8 drivers averaged 3.5 weeks employment. The money would change everything. Rent caught up, Sienna's bedroom furniture replaced, food that wasn't generic brand or from the discount shelf, maybe even savings again, the kind of cushion that let a man sleep without counting days until disaster. Marcus had never driven professionally in his life, but he had a clean license, a working car that he'd somehow kept through bankruptcy by paying that bill before any other, and a daughter who deserved better than watching her father fail. He dressed in the only suit he owned, a charcoal gray off-the-rack number from Macy's that he'd bought for job interviews and had worn so often it had started to shine at the elbows. Sienna stirred as he moved through the room, her eyes opening to find him in the dim light. Her voice came sleepy and small. "You going somewhere, Daddy?" Marcus knelt beside the bed, his hand gentle on her braided hair. "Job interview, baby girl. Big one." Sienna's gap-toothed smile appeared, the same smile her mother used to have. "When you coming home?" The question was ritual between them, the call and response they'd developed over 4 years of single parenthood. Marcus felt his throat tighten, but kept his voice steady. "When stars need me, baby. Our love is bigger than the sky." She giggled, satisfied, and burrowed back into the covers. Marcus stood, checked his reflection one last time in the bathroom mirror that had a crack running through it, and headed into the rain. The Ashford Technologies Tower dominated Cleveland's financial district like a steel and glass monument to ambition. 50 stories of reflective windows that caught the morning sun and threw it back at the city like a challenge. Marcus's 2009 Honda Civic looked pathetic in the underground parking garage next to the Tesla and Mercedes vehicles that filled the executive spaces. A valet in a crisp uniform looked at the Honda with barely concealed disdain. Marcus handed over his keys with dignity intact. "I'm here for an interview with Ms. Ashford." The valet's expression shifted to something between surprise and pity. "Fifth floor, elevator bank to the right." The lobby was all marble and chrome, the kind of space designed to make visitors feel small. A security guard checked Marcus's identification, made a call, and directed him to wait. The chairs in the waiting area cost more than Marcus's monthly rent used to be back when he could afford rent without choosing between it and food. 45 minutes passed. Marcus had learned patience the hard way, so he sat without fidgeting and studied the annual report displayed on the coffee table. Ashford Technologies specialized in enterprise software solutions, the kind of behind-the-scenes systems that made billion-dollar companies run smoothly. Revenue had grown 40% year over year for the past 4 years under Victoria Ashford's leadership. The woman had inherited a successful company from her father and turned it into an empire. The elevator doors opened and a woman emerged who made the marble and chrome seem cheap by comparison. Joanna Reeves, according to her nameplate, moved with the efficient grace of someone who had learned to navigate power dynamics. She was 29, white, wearing a charcoal pantsuit that probably cost what Marcus used to make in a week. Her voice was professional, neutral, giving nothing away. "Mr. Holloway, Miss Ashford will see you now." The executive floor occupied the building's top level, and the view from the elevator was enough to steal breath. Cleveland sprawled below them, the lake visible in the distance, the city looking almost beautiful from this height. Joanna led Marcus through corridors lined with abstract art that probably had meaning to people who understood such things, past offices occupied by people who looked too busy to notice a nervous man in a shiny suit. Victoria Ashford's office could have held Marcus's entire apartment with room left over. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 walls, a desk that looked hand-carved from a single piece of wood, shelves holding leather-bound books and awards that caught the light, and behind the desk, the woman herself. She stood as Marcus entered, and the first thing he noticed was that she was tall, nearly 6 feet in heels, that added unnecessary height to someone who clearly never worried about being overlooked. Her platinum blonde hair was cut in a sharp bob that framed features that could have been carved from ice. The Armani suit was navy blue, perfectly tailored, and her eyes were the palest shade of blue Marcus had ever seen outside of a winter sky. Victoria didn't offer her hand. Her voice came clipped, British, boarding school, precise, despite a childhood spent in Cleveland. "Mr. Holloway, you're precisely on time. That's encouraging since punctuality was apparently beyond my previous 8 drivers." Marcus met her gaze without flinching. "Yes, ma'am. I understand this is a challenging position." She raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Challenging? What a diplomatic word. Mr. Holloway, I work 18-hour days. I travel with minimal notice. I attend events where image and discretion matter absolutely. My schedule changes hourly. My last driver quit mid-road during rush hour because I asked him to take an alternative path. The one before that lasted 6 days before informing me I had control issues. Are you going to abandon your responsibilities when things become difficult?" The question hung in the air between them like a test. Marcus thought of Sienna sleeping in his bed because they'd sold her furniture. He thought of the eviction notice and the $94 in his account and the 68 job applications that had gone nowhere. But more than that, he thought about what his mother had taught him before cancer took her 5 years ago. Dignity isn't about circumstances. It's about choices. His response came measured, firm, meeting her eyes the way he'd learned to meet the eyes of people who thought they were better than him. "No, ma'am, I won't abandon anything I commit to." My daughter depends on me. That's taught me what real commitment means. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those pale eyes. Your application shows you were previously employed in accounting. Why the career change? The question was fair, but it still landed like a small wound. Mercer and Associates downsized 9 months ago. I've been looking for stable work since. This economy hasn't been kind to people with gaps in their resume. She leaned back against her desk, arms crossed, studying him with an intensity that felt like being examined under a microscope. And you think driving a car requires no particular skill or intelligence, that it's somehow beneath your credentials? The question caught Marcus off guard, and he took a moment to consider before responding. Not at all, ma'am. Being responsible for someone's safety and time requires considerable skill. Managing complex schedules representing your company, maintaining discretion about confidential matters, these are professional responsibilities that deserve respect. I need this job, Ms. Ashford. That means I'll do it better than anyone you've had before because I can't afford to fail. Victoria studied him for what felt like an hour compressed into 30 seconds. When she finally spoke, her tone had shifted slightly, still professional, but with something underneath that might have been respect. You start Monday, 5:45 a.m., sharp at my residence. Joanna will provide the address and a company vehicle. Don't disappoint me, Mr. Holloway. The dismissal was clear. Marcus stood, nodded once with the dignity his mother had taught him, and left before relief could show on his face. The hallway seemed brighter. The elevator ride down felt faster. By the time Marcus reached his Civic in the parking garage, his hands were shaking. He sat in the driver's seat and let himself feel it for exactly 60 seconds. The relief, the gratitude, the desperate hope that this time things might work out. Then he pulled out his phone and called the one person in the world he trusted with Sienna. Delilah Warren answered on the second ring, her voice carrying the warm rasp of a woman who'd smoked for 40 years before quitting cold turkey at age 60. Baby, you get the job. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Yeah, Miss Delilah, I got it. Her laugh came rich and full of joy for him. Lord have mercy. When you start Monday morning, 5:45, I'm going to need your help with Sienna in the early mornings until I figure out the schedule. Delilah had lived in the apartment next to Marcus's for 3 years, a retired nurse who'd taken to Sienna like a grandmother to a grandchild. She was 68, black with silver hair she kept in neat braids, and a way of speaking truth that made people listen, whether they wanted to or not. Her response came firm and sure. Baby, you know that child is always welcome here. You go make that money. We'll handle the rest. Marcus ended the call and sat in the parking garage for another moment, watching rain streak down the windshield. $120,000 a year. The number still felt impossible, like something from another person's life. But it was his now, his and Sienna's. He drove home carefully, obeying every traffic law, aware that everything depended on maintaining this fragile new reality. Monday morning arrived with the kind of cold that made Cleveland winters legendary. Marcus dressed in the dark, moving through his morning routine with quiet efficiency while Sienna slept. The company vehicle had been delivered Sunday evening, a black Mercedes S-Class, that felt like driving a spaceship compared to his Honda. The key fob sat on his kitchen counter, next to written instructions about Victoria's preferences, temperature at 68 degrees NPR on low-volume bottles of San Pellegrino, in the cup holders, phone charging cable ready. He arrived at Victoria's building at 5:30, 15 minutes early, because early was on time and on time was late. The building was in Cleveland Heights, a converted historic mansion that had been gutted and rebuilt into luxury condominiums. The kind of place where the monthly maintenance fees exceeded Marcus's old rent. Victoria emerged at precisely 5:45, wearing a black suit and carrying a leather bag that probably cost more than the Mercedes. She slid into the back seat without greeting him, her phone already at her ear, her voice crisp as she discussed Tokyo market movements with someone who apparently worked through the night. Marcus pulled into traffic and began what would become the rhythm of his new life. The first week tested every ounce of patience Marcus had developed through 4 years of single parenthood and 9 months of unemployment. Victoria Ashford was exacting in ways that made demanding seem like a compliment. The temperature was always wrong, too warm by 2 degrees, too cold by 1. The route choices were questioned: why this highway instead of that surface street? Why this lane instead of that? The radio volume was adjusted 3 times in the first hour. The way Marcus opened her door wasn't quite right. Slower approach to the curb, she didn't want to appear rushed. But Marcus had spent years reading financial statements where a misplaced decimal could mean millions in errors. He'd learned to track details that others missed. So he made mental notes of every correction, adjusted his approach, and improved incrementally each day. By Wednesday, Victoria's corrections came less frequently. By Friday, she'd gone an entire morning without criticism. Marcus noticed things during those long hours behind the wheel. Victoria never ate lunch, surviving on black coffee and the kind of determination that burned from within. She took calls from Hong Kong at 5 in the morning and London at 11 at night. Her shoulders slumped when she thought no one was watching, exhaustion showing in the set of her spine. Friday evening found them in rush hour traffic on I-90, barely moving, and Victoria's phone rang with a tone that made her entire body tense. Marcus watched in the rearview mirror as she answered. Her voice carried the clipped precision of someone delivering bad news to themselves. "Whitmore, what do you mean the Morrison deal fell through? That's unacceptable. No, I'll handle it myself." She ended the call and pressed her fingers to her temples. Eyes closed. For a moment, she looked young and overwhelmed, rather than formidable and in control. Marcus kept his voice gentle, respectful of the boundaries between employer and employee. "Tough day, ma'am." Victoria's eyes opened, meeting his in the mirror. "They're all tough days, Mr. Holloway. That's the nature of building something that matters." The response felt like a door closing, but Marcus had learned when to push and when to wait. He waited. 3 minutes of silence passed before Victoria spoke again, and this time her voice carried a weariness that felt honest. "When's the last time you took a real break, a day where work didn't follow you home?" Her laugh came bitter and sharp. "Days off are luxuries reserved for people who don't have competitors working through weekends and international markets moving while they sleep. My father built this company through relentless focus. I can't afford less." Marcus navigated around a stalled truck, the movement smooth and practiced. "Burnout isn't productive either, ma'am. Even machines need maintenance." Victoria's gaze in the mirror turned sharp, assessing. "Are you giving me advice on running my company, Mr. Holloway?" The question could have been hostile, but Marcus heard genuine curiosity underneath. "No, ma'am, just observing that even the best engines fail without proper care." For the first time all week, Victoria fell silent without delivering a correction. Marcus took that as progress. That weekend, Marcus used his first paycheck to catch up on rent-buy groceries that weren't store brand and take Sienna to McDonald's for a celebration dinner. They sat in a booth with cracked vinyl seats while she chattered about school and showed him drawings of butterflies with wings that changed colors. Her question came between bites of chicken nuggets, innocent and devastating. "Daddy, why do you work so late now?" Marcus wiped ketchup from her chin with a napkin. "Because I'm helping someone who works very hard, sweetheart, and she's helping us have a good life by giving Daddy this job." Sienna considered this with the seriousness 7-year-olds brought to important questions. "Is she nice?" The question required thought. Marcus had learned that children deserved honest answers when possible. "She's complicated, baby girl. She's trying to be very good at something very difficult. That doesn't always leave room for nice. But I think underneath all that trying, there's someone who wants to be good." Sienna nodded satisfied and returned to her nuggets. Marcus watched his daughter and thought about Victoria Ashford's slumped shoulders in the backseat when she thought no one was looking. Complicated didn't begin to cover it. Monday of week 3 brought crisis in a form Marcus hadn't anticipated. His phone rang at 4:30 in the morning with Delilah's number showing on the screen, and his heart immediately dropped to his stomach because good news never came at 4:30. Delilah's voice came strained with pain. "Baby, I fell. Tried to get up to use the bathroom, and my hip just gave out. Ambulance is on the way." Marcus was already moving, throwing on clothes, mind racing through options that didn't exist. "I'm coming right now. Where's Sienna?" The little girl's sleepy voice came through the phone, far from the receiver. "Daddy," Delilah managed to keep her voice steady despite obvious pain. "She's fine, baby. Sitting right here with me being brave. But Marcus, I can't watch her today. I'm sorry." The apology landed like a blow because Delilah had nothing to apologize for, and Marcus had nowhere else to turn. No family left in Cleveland. No friends who weren't actually work acquaintances from jobs he no longer had. No childcare he could afford on 3 weeks of paychecks. He made it to Delilah's apartment as the paramedics were loading her onto a stretcher. Sienna stood in purple pajamas and butterfly slippers, her backpack already on, because she was smart enough to know today was going to be different. Delilah reached for Marcus's hand as they wheeled her past. Her voice came fierce despite the morphine starting to work. "You take care of that baby, and you keep that job. I'll be fine." Marcus watched them load her into the ambulance, then looked down at Sienna's trusting face and made a decision that would either save everything or destroy it. He called Victoria's number at 5:15, his hands shaking as it rang. When she answered with the crisp efficiency of someone already awake and working, he forced his voice to stay steady. The words came rushed despite his attempt at control. "Ms. Ashford, I have a family emergency. My neighbor who watches my daughter was just taken to the hospital. I need to make arrangements, find someone who can—" Victoria's interruption came sharp and immediate. "Where are you now, Mr. Holloway?" "At my apartment, ma'am. I'll find a replacement driver for today if you can give me an hour to—" Her voice cut through his planning with unexpected force. "Where is your daughter currently?" Marcus looked down at Sienna, who was holding his free hand and trying to be brave. "With me. But I can call an agency, get a sitter." Victoria's response came before he could finish the thought. "Bring her to the office, now." The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, convinced he'd misheard. Bring a 7-year-old to the office of a woman who made grown men cry. The idea seemed insane, but it was also the only option he had that didn't involve losing the job that had saved them. He knelt to Sienna's level, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Baby girl, you're coming to work with Daddy today. You need to be very good and very quiet. Can you do that?" Sienna's gap-toothed smile appeared brave and bright. "I can be quiet like a butterfly, Daddy. Butterflies don't make noise." Marcus held his daughter close for a moment, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, and prayed he wasn't about to ruin everything. Victoria's building loomed ahead as Marcus navigated morning traffic with Sienna buckled into the back seat, her purple backpack clutched on her lap like a shield. The little girl pressed her face to the window, eyes wide at the cityscape sliding past. Marcus's stomach churned with anxiety, masked by the calm exterior he'd perfected. This was it, the moment where Victoria would realize he came with complications with a child and responsibilities that made him less than ideal. He'd prepared himself for termination, had already started mentally composing his next round of job applications. The building's underground garage felt like descending into judgment. Marcus parked the Mercedes in its designated spot, walked around to open the back door, and helped Sienna out. Her small hand found his, automatically trusting him to navigate this unfamiliar world. The elevator ride to the executive floor took 43 seconds that felt like hours. Sienna stayed pressed against his leg, her usual chatter silenced by the gleaming surfaces and hushed atmosphere. When the doors opened, Joanna Reeves stood waiting with an expression Marcus couldn't read. Her voice came neutral, professional. "Ms. Ashford is in her office. She asked that you both come directly." The walk down that corridor felt like approaching a verdict. Marcus kept Sienna's hand in his drawing strength from her small fingers wrapped around his larger ones. When they reached Victoria's door, he knocked twice and entered. Victoria stood by the window, backlit by morning sun that turned her platinum hair into a halo. She turned as they entered, and for a moment Marcus saw her expression, shift, surprise, assessment, something that might have been understanding. Then the mask returned. Sienna, however, had no mask. The little girl's voice came out loud in the quiet office, filled with genuine wonder. "Wow, your office is really big. Are you nice to my daddy?" Victoria's eyebrow raised, and Marcus started to apologize, but she held up one hand to stop him. When she spoke, her voice had softened in a way Marcus had never heard before. "You must be Sienna." The little girl nodded, gap-toothed smile appearing. "Yes, ma'am. Daddy talks about you. He says you work really hard, and that's why you're tired sometimes." Victoria's gaze flicked to Marcus, something unreadable in those ice-blue eyes, before returning to Sienna. "Your father is very observant and very wise. Does he tell you other things about me?" Sienna's response came with the brutal honesty of childhood. "He says you're complicated, but you're trying to be good at something very difficult, and that underneath you want to be good." The silence that followed felt heavy with meaning. Marcus couldn't quite grasp. Victoria's expression had shifted again, the Ice Queen facade cracking just enough to show something human underneath. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a gentleness that seemed to surprise even herself. Her words came measured, careful. "Your father sees more than most people, Sienna. That's a gift." She pressed a button on her desk phone, and Joanna appeared with the efficiency of someone who'd been waiting. Victoria's instructions came crisp but not unkind. "Set up the conference room adjacent to my office with activities suitable for a 7-year-old. Coloring books, tablets with educational games, something to keep her engaged. And arrange for meals to be brought in. Ask Mr. Holloway what Sienna likes." Joanna nodded and left, and Victoria turned back to Marcus with an expression he was beginning to recognize as her version of compassion. "Your neighbor's situation isn't going to resolve today. We'll make this work until you have stable arrangements." Marcus felt his throat tighten with gratitude, and something else he couldn't quite name. "Thank you, ma'am. This is incredibly generous." Victoria's response came quick, almost defensive. "It's practical. Consistent childcare will make you a more reliable employee. This serves the company's interest." But Marcus saw through the business-like tone the same way he'd learned to read financial statements for what they revealed and what they concealed. Victoria Ashford, the woman everyone called heartless, had just rearranged her day to accommodate a 7-year-old because underneath the armor, she cared. Sienna spent the morning in the conference room that Joanna had transformed into a child-friendly space with remarkable efficiency. Educational apps on an iPad, coloring books with butterfly themes that someone had clearly gone out to purchase specifically, and a lunch of chicken fingers and fruit that Sienna declared better than McDonald's. Between meetings, Victoria would check on the little girl through the glass walls. Marcus noticed her watching Sienna color the way her expression softened when the child looked up and waved. During a conference call that ran long, Sienna crept into Victoria's office and settled in a corner with her coloring book quiet as a butterfly, like she'd promised. Victoria, on speakerphone with what sounded like a contentious negotiation, glanced at the child and continued her conversation without missing a beat. When the call ended 40 minutes later, she looked down to find Sienna had colored a picture and left it on her desk, a butterfly, with Victoria's name written carefully underneath in purple crayon. Marcus retrieved Sienna for lunch, but not before seeing Victoria slip the drawing into her desk drawer rather than the trash. The day proceeded differently than any Marcus had experienced in his 3 weeks of employment. Victoria's usual sharp edges seemed muted, her criticisms non-existent. When they drove to a meeting across town, she asked Sienna about school and listened to rambling stories about playground politics with what appeared to be genuine interest. During a lull in traffic, Sienna's question came from the back seat, innocent and penetrating. "Miss Victoria, why don't you eat lunch? Daddy says you're always working, but you need food to think good." Marcus tensed, waiting for the sharp response. Instead, Victoria's answer came thoughtful, almost vulnerable. "That's a good question, Sienna. I suppose I forget sometimes. There's always so much to do." Sienna's 7-year-old wisdom struck again. "Daddy says taking care of yourself is work. You can't fix things if you're broken." In the rearview mirror, Marcus watched Victoria's expression shift through several emotions before settling on something that looked almost like wonder. She didn't respond immediately, and Sienna, satisfied with having made her point, returned to the tablet Joanna had loaded with butterfly documentaries. The day ended at 6:30, later than Marcus usually worked, but still reasonable given Victoria's normal schedule. As he was preparing to take Sienna home, Victoria stopped him with a hand on his arm, the first time she'd initiated physical contact. Her voice came quiet, meant only for him. "How was your neighbor?" Marcus had called the hospital during lunch. "Broken hip, surgery tomorrow, probably 6 weeks, recovery minimum." Victoria nodded, processing. "And your childcare situation?" The question he'd been dreading all day. Marcus kept his voice steady despite the fear underneath. "I'll figure something out, ma'am. This won't happen again." Victoria's expression shifted to something almost annoyed. "Mr. Holloway, don't insult my intelligence by pretending you have resources you clearly don't. Childcare in this city costs nearly as much as rent. You've been employed for 3 weeks. The math doesn't work." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, shame mixing with gratitude in a confusing cocktail. Before he could respond, Victoria continued. Her words came brisk, businesslike, but her eyes betrayed something softer. "Joanna's sister runs a small private school in Shaker Heights. I've arranged for Sienna to attend at no cost, call it a company benefit, for employees with exceptional dedication. Before and after school care is included. You can drop her off at 7:30 and pick her up at 6. The offer was so generous it felt like charity, and Marcus's pride warred with his desperation. Pride lost the way it had to when Sienna's well-being was at stake. His response came thick with emotion he couldn't quite hide. "Ms. Ashford, I don't know how to thank you." Victoria's voice snapped back to its usual crispness. "Don't read more into this than necessary. It's a retention strategy. Good employees are hard to find. I'm protecting my investment." But when she thought Marcus wasn't looking, Victoria glanced at Sienna one more time with an expression that had nothing to do with investment strategies and everything to do with a lonely woman seeing something she'd been missing without knowing it. That night over dinner at their small kitchen table, Sienna chattered about her day while Marcus absorbed the magnitude of what had happened. Victoria Ashford had seen his greatest vulnerability, and instead of exploiting it, she'd protected it. The gesture meant more than she could possibly know, more than he could adequately express. Sienna's observation came between bites of macaroni and cheese. "I think Miss Victoria is sad, Daddy." Marcus looked up from his own plate. Why do you think that sweet girl? Her response came with the clarity children sometimes possessed. She has lots of pretty things, but no pictures of family. And she always looks like she's thinking about something that makes her worried. Like you used to look before you got the job. Marcus realized his 7-year-old daughter had seen something in Victoria that the business world missed: vulnerability, hidden beneath armor, loneliness, masked by success. The observation settled in his chest like a weight and a gift. Before bed, Sienna asked her ritual question. When you coming home, Daddy? Marcus tucked the covers around her, kissed her forehead, and delivered the response that had become their mantra. When stars need me, baby. Our love is bigger than the sky. She smiled, satisfied, and drifted towards sleep. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching his daughter breathe, thinking about Victoria Ashford, working alone in her office at this hour, and wondering what it cost to be so successful and so isolated. Week 8 arrived with the kind of bitter cold that made Cleveland feel like punishment. Marcus had settled into the rhythm of his new life: mornings at Victoria's building, days navigating the city according to her demanding schedule, evenings with Sienna at the small private school that had become her second home. The little girl thrived there, making friends with children whose parents were doctors and lawyers and executives, bringing home art projects and stories about science experiments. Victoria's demeanor toward Marcus had shifted in subtle ways. The constant corrections had stopped. She asked his opinion on route choices rather than criticizing his decisions. Sometimes during long drives, she would lower her phone and simply watch the city pass outside the window. One morning, stuck in construction traffic on I-90, Victoria's voice broke the comfortable silence that had developed between them. Mr. Holloway, you mentioned you worked in accounting. What was your specialty? Marcus kept his eyes on the brake lights ahead, aware of the weight this question carried. Senior accountant at Mercer & Associates. I handled operational efficiency audits for mid-market companies, looking for waste in systems, streamlining processes. Numbers tell stories if you know how to read them. Victoria leaned forward slightly, and Marcus could see her reflection in the rearview mirror, interest sharpening her features. And you see patterns others miss. The observation felt more like statement than question. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. It's a gift and a curse, ma'am. Once you start seeing inefficiencies, you cannot unsee them. Her next question came carefully, as though testing boundaries. Have you noticed any patterns in my schedule, inefficiencies that could be improved? Marcus had been noticing inefficiencies since week 1. The way Victoria's meetings clustered poorly, sending them across town 3 times when better scheduling could have handled everything in 2 trips. The vendor lunches that happened in restaurants 40 minutes apart when closer options existed. The late afternoon appointments that guaranteed rush hour traffic both ways. He'd been keeping mental notes out of habit, the accountant's brain working even when technically off duty. His response came measured, respectful of the line between observation and overstepping. With respect, ma'am, that's not really my role. Victoria's reflection showed a slight smile. Humor me, Mr. Holloway. What would you change? So Marcus told her. He walked through the scheduling patterns. He'd noticed the clustering that could save hours per week, the vendors who could be consolidated, the meeting times that created unnecessary complications. His voice stayed professional, framing everything as observation rather than criticism. When he finished, silence filled the car for several long moments. Victoria's response came quiet, almost thoughtful. How much time would these changes save? Marcus had done the math already. He couldn't help but do the math. Approximately 6 hours per week. Maybe 8 if we optimize the vendor relationships. That's time you could use for strategic thinking instead of sitting in traffic. More silence. Then Victoria's voice came with a decision made. I'm offering you an additional role. Operational efficiency consultant, reporting directly to me. $25,000 annually on top of your current salary. Flexible hours around your driving responsibilities. Your first project is analyzing my entire operation and identifying every inefficiency you can find. The offer hung in the air like something too good to be real. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel, mind racing through implications. More money meant security for Sienna. It meant savings cushion against disaster, maybe even college funds starting early. But it also meant stepping into territory beyond driving, making himself visible in ways that could attract attention he didn't want. Before he could respond, Victoria continued, and her voice carried something that sounded almost like respect. You're clearly capable of more than driving, Mr. Holloway. I'd be foolish not to utilize your skills, unless you're comfortable limiting yourself. The challenge in her question sparked something in Marcus's chest. He'd been limiting himself for 9 months, taking jobs beneath his qualifications, accepting less because desperation demanded it. But Victoria was offering him a chance to use his actual skills to prove his worth beyond the steering wheel. His acceptance came firm and clear. I'll need access to your scheduling systems and vendor contracts, and I'll need to understand the decision-making process behind current arrangements before I recommend changes. Victoria's smile appeared in the mirror, genuine and bright. Joanna will provide everything you need. Welcome to the team, Mr. Holloway. The words landed with unexpected weight. Not just an employee, not just the driver, part of the team. New Year's Eve arrived dressed in snow and the kind of cold that made breath visible. Marcus picked up Victoria at 4 in the afternoon, earlier than usual, because the gala started at 7 and required an hour's drive to the venue in downtown Cleveland. She emerged from her building in a gown that stole his breath, midnight blue silk that caught the light, hair styled in soft waves instead of her usual severe bob diamonds at her throat that probably cost more than Marcus's yearly salary. She slid into the back seat and their eyes met in the mirror. For a moment, neither spoke, the air heavy with something unspoken. Then Victoria broke the silence with her usual efficiency. The grand ballroom at the Renaissance. I'll need you to wait through the event. Should end around 11, but could run later. Marcus nodded, pulling into traffic, hyper-aware of her presence behind him in ways that had nothing to do with professional responsibility. The drive passed in comfortable silence, the kind that had developed between them over 8 weeks of shared mornings and long days. Halfway to the venue, Victoria's voice came soft and unexpected. Marcus, may I ask you something personal? He met her eyes in the mirror, seeing vulnerability there that she usually kept hidden. Of course. Her question came carefully, as though she feared the answer. When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because Sienna needed it or because work required it, just for yourself? The question hit harder than she probably knew. Marcus thought back through months of unemployment and years of single parenthood. His entire life had become about Sienna's needs and making enough money to meet them. Personal wants had fallen away so gradually he'd stopped noticing their absence. His response came honest, tinged with the melancholy of recognition. I don't remember. Maybe before Natalie died. Everything since has been about survival and Sienna. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried understanding. I think we might be the same in that way. My entire existence has become the company. I can't remember the last time I did something just because it brought me joy. Marcus glanced back at her, seeing her fully for perhaps the first time. Not the CEO, not the boss, but a 32-year-old woman who'd sacrificed personal happiness for professional success and was only now beginning to notice the cost. His next words came carefully, knowing they crossed a line but unable to stop himself. What would bring you joy, Victoria, if you could do anything tonight instead of attending this gala? Her answer came without hesitation, surprising them both. I'd be somewhere quiet with someone who sees me, really sees me. Not the company or the money or the reputation, just me. The confession hung in the air between them, intimate and impossible. Marcus's throat tightened because he understood exactly what she meant. He saw her, had been seeing her for weeks now. The woman who forgot to eat lunch, the CEO who teared up over failed deals that would have cost jobs, the lonely person who spent holidays working because work was safer than facing emptiness. Before he could respond, they arrived at the Renaissance. Valets approached, cameras flashed from photographers documenting arrivals. Victoria's mask slipped back into place with practiced ease, the vulnerable woman disappearing behind the Ice Queen facade. She exited the car with practiced grace, but before walking toward the ballroom entrance, she bent slightly to speak through Marcus's window. Her voice came quiet enough that only he could hear. There's a driver's lounge on the lower level. You should be comfortable there, but Marcus, thank you for seeing me. Then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd of Cleveland's elite, and Marcus was left alone with words that felt like promise and impossibility tangled together. February arrived with the kind of thaw that fooled Cleveland into thinking winter might release its grip early. Marcus woke to sunlight streaming through cracked blinds and the realization that he'd been happy for 3 consecutive weeks, a record since Natalie's death. The happiness felt fragile, unauthorized, like something that would shatter if examined too closely. Sienna sat at their kitchen table cutting construction paper into heart shapes, tongue poking out in concentration. Valentine's Day loomed 3 days away, and her second-grade class was preparing cards for everyone. Pink and red paper scraps littered the floor like confetti from a celebration that hadn't happened yet. Marcus poured coffee and watched his daughter work, aware that children saw things adults spent energy hiding. She'd noticed the change in him over the past month, the way he smiled at his phone. When Victoria texted late at night, the lightness in his step that had nothing to do with job security and everything to do with stolen moments in parked cars discussing dreams and fears. Sienna held up a card decorated with glitter and stickers. This one's for Emma because she shares her snacks. This one's for Jackson, even though he's annoying sometimes because Mrs. Martinez says we should be kind to everyone. Her hand reached for another piece of paper, and she started creating something more elaborate. Marcus recognized the care she put into this one extra glitter, a butterfly drawn in the corner, her best attempt at cursive writing, spelling out a name. The words she wrote made Marcus's breath catch. To Miss Victoria, loves Sienna and Daddy who likes you. He crossed the room in 3 strides, kneeling beside her chair. Baby girl, we need to talk about that card. Sienna looked up with those observant eyes that missed nothing. But you do like her, Daddy. A lot. I can tell by how you look at her. Heat crept up Marcus's neck because his 7-year-old had just called him out with the precision of someone who understood emotions better than most adults. He chose his words carefully, aware that this conversation mattered. Liking someone and telling them are complicated things. There are boundaries we need to respect. Her response came with the brutal honesty that made children both terrifying and wonderful. But Daddy, you do like her, and she's lonely. I can see it in her eyes when she thinks nobody's watching. You make her smile. Why is that bad? Marcus had no answer that would satisfy a child who saw the world in simpler terms than reality allowed. He settled for redirecting. How about we make a nice card that just says Happy Valentine's Day from You Keep It Simple? Sienna studied him with an expression far too knowing for 7 years. Okay, Daddy, but you should still tell her. She needs to know somebody sees her being lonely. The observation landed like a stone in Marcus's chest because Sienna had articulated something he had been feeling but couldn't quite name. Victoria Ashford, surrounded by wealth and success, was profoundly lonely in ways that money couldn't fix. Later that night, after Sienna slept and the apartment settled into familiar creaks and silence, Marcus sat on the fire escape despite the cold. His phone showed a text from Victoria sent 20 minutes ago. Still working? Lost another contract today. Beginning to think I'm cursed. He called instead of texting, and she answered on the first ring with a voice that carried exhaustion like weight. Marcus, I thought you'd be asleep. The sound of his name in her mouth still sent electricity through his nervous system. Sienna said something today that got me thinking. Victoria's laugh came soft and sad. What profound wisdom did she share this time? Marcus watched his breath form clouds in the winter air. She said you're lonely, that she can see it in your eyes when you think nobody's watching. Silence stretched between them, the kind that held truth too painful to acknowledge easily. When Victoria finally spoke, her voice had cracked open to show the vulnerable person underneath. Your daughter is remarkably perceptive, also slightly terrifying. The admission gave Marcus permission to speak his own truth. I've been in love with you for 2 months, Victoria. I think about you constantly. I look forward to mornings because I get to see you. I find excuses to make the drives longer because it means more time in your presence. And I'm terrified because this can't possibly work, but I can't seem to stop feeling it anyway. His confession hung in the night air, irretrievable and honest. Victoria's breathing changed on the other end of the line, becoming shallower, more rapid. When she responded, her words came rushed and desperate. Come to my building, now, please. Marcus ended the call and moved before doubt could interfere. He texted Delilah, who'd recovered enough to resume light babysitting, and she responded immediately. Go get your woman, baby. I got Sienna. The drive to Victoria's building took 12 minutes that felt like hours. She waited in the lobby wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her platinum hair down around her shoulders, instead of styled, looking more human and accessible than Marcus had ever seen her. They rode the elevator to the penthouse in charged silence, standing on opposite sides of the car like magnets fighting attraction. Inside her apartment, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that screamed expensive loneliness, Victoria finally turned to face him. Her ice-blue eyes held something raw and unguarded. The words tumbled out without her usual precision. Marcus, I don't know how to do this. I've spent my entire adult life building walls, being the Ice Queen, proving I'm as ruthless as my father. But when I'm with you, those walls feel exhausting instead of protective. I find myself wanting to be soft, to be seen, to be... She couldn't finish the thought, so Marcus finished it for her. Human. Victoria nodded and tears spilled down her cheeks, the CEO crying in front of her driver, all pretense stripped away. Marcus crossed the space between them and pulled her into his arms, feeling her body shake, with months of suppressed emotion finally released. Against his chest, her voice came muffled but clear. I'm falling in love with you. I think I started falling that night you told me I deserved peace. Nobody's ever told me I deserved anything except more responsibility and higher profits. Marcus tilted her chin up so their eyes met. You deserve everything good this world has to offer. Happiness, rest, love that doesn't come with conditions or performance metrics. The kiss happened without conscious decision, inevitable as gravity. Victoria's lips tasted like tears and coffee and surrender. Marcus poured 2 months of denied feelings into that kiss, all the stolen glances. The careful distance maintained the aching awareness of her presence. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Victoria's expression held wonder mixed with terror. Her next words came careful, testing reality. What do we do now? How do we navigate this when the world will have opinions about an executive and her driver falling in love? Marcus kept his arms around her, anchoring them both. We figure it out together, one day at a time, and we remember that what we feel matters more than what they think. Victoria rested her forehead against his. I've never been good at not caring what people think. That's what built this company. His response came firm and sure. Then maybe it's time to care about something besides the company. Maybe it's time to build something just for you. They stood like that while the city lights sparkled beyond the windows. Two people from incompatible worlds choosing each other despite every logical reason not to. The following weeks unfolded like a secret Marcus and Victoria guarded with careful precision. They kept their relationship hidden during work hours, maintaining professional distance that fooled exactly no one who paid attention. Joanna noticed immediately, her knowing smiles suggesting approval she didn't voice aloud. The other drivers gossiped in break rooms about how the Ice Queen had thawed, though they couldn't identify the source of the change. Marcus spent evenings at Victoria's penthouse after Sienna went to sleep with Delilah. They cooked dinner together in a kitchen. Victoria admitted she'd barely used the act of creating something simple and nourishing, feeling revolutionary to a woman who survived on takeout and ambition. They talked about everything: childhoods and loss, dreams deferred, and hopes rekindled, the weight of expectations and the freedom of being fully seen. Mid-March brought spring's false promise and a children's museum visit that changed everything. Victoria had suggested it, tentatively wanting to spend time with Sienna outside the office environment. Marcus agreed despite his reservations about making their relationship more real by involving his daughter in something that might not last. But watching Victoria crouch beside Sienna at the butterfly exhibit, listening with genuine fascination as his daughter explained metamorphosis and wing patterns, Marcus's reservations crumbled. Victoria wasn't performing interest or checking a box. She was present, engaged, seeing his daughter as a complete person worth her time and attention. Sienna grabbed Victoria's hand with the casual intimacy of childhood. Miss Victoria, are you going to be my new mom? The question froze all three of them in place. Victoria's eyes went wide, searching Marcus's face for permission or guidance. He offered a small nod, leaving the response to her. Victoria knelt to Sienna's eye level, her voice gentle but honest. Would you like that, Sienna? The gap-toothed smile appeared bright and hopeful. Yes, Daddy's happier now. And you smile more. I think you make each other better. Victoria blinked back tears, and Marcus understood that his daughter's blessing meant more to her than any board approval or market validation. I would be honored to be part of your family, Sienna, if your daddy and I can figure out how to make this work. Sienna threw her arms around Victoria's neck, the hug fierce and trusting. Marcus watched the woman he loved hold his daughter and felt something shift permanently in his chest. This wasn't just about him and Victoria anymore. This was about building something that could withstand the pressure coming their way. But doubt crept in during quiet moments when Marcus's mind wouldn't shut down. Week 14 found him pacing Victoria's penthouse while she worked late, wrestling with thoughts he couldn't silence. When she arrived home at 10, exhausted from back-to-back meetings, he voiced the fear that had been building. His words came tight with anxiety. I'm worried people will think I'm using you, that I saw a lonely billionaire and played the long game. Victoria set down her bag and crossed to him, taking both his hands in hers. Anyone who actually knows you knows better, Marcus. Your integrity is visible in everything you do. He pulled away, unable to accept the easy comfort. But they don't know me, they see a black driver and a white billionaire. They'll create narratives that fit their expectations. Gold digger, social climber, whatever lets them avoid seeing what's actually happening. Victoria's expression hardened with determination. Let them create whatever narratives they need. I choose you, Marcus. Their opinions don't change that fundamental truth. The declaration should have reassured him, but Marcus understood power dynamics in ways Victoria's privilege prevented her from fully grasping. It's easy to say that when you're not the one who will be called opportunistic and worse. When your daughter won't face questions about why her daddy's with a rich white woman. Victoria flinched at the harsh truth but didn't retreat. Then we make ourselves undeniable. We show them that what we have is real and valuable and built on more than circumstances. We prove them wrong by living our truth. Marcus wanted to believe her conviction could shield them from the storm he saw coming. But he'd lived too long as a black man in America to trust that truth alone protected anyone from prejudice wrapped in concern. The storm arrived faster than either anticipated. Week 16 brought spring break and Sienna's school play, a production of The Very Hungry Caterpillar, where she played a butterfly with construction paper wings. Marcus and Victoria sat together in the audience, hands clasped, because Sienna had insisted Victoria needed to see her fly. They forgot about the cameras, the ever-present paparazzi who tracked Cleveland's elite looking for scandals to sell. The photo captured them in profile, Marcus's dark hand wrapped around Victoria's pale one, both of them smiling at something Sienna had done on stage. The image was tender, intimate, impossible to misinterpret. By morning, it was everywhere. Tabloid websites, social media business, news coverage that pretended concern while trafficking in sensationalism. The headlines competed to be most cutting. Billionaire's downgrade CEO dates the help. Victoria Ashford's questionable judgment. When wealth meets the working class, a modern romance or PR disaster. Marcus's phone exploded with texts from numbers he didn't recognize. Reporters seeking comments on his relationship with Ms. Ashford. The company's stock dipped 4% on opening, investors apparently concerned that their CEO's personal choices indicated professional instability. Victoria called an emergency meeting with her public relations team while Marcus drove her to the office through a gauntlet of cameras and shouted questions. She ignored them with Ice Queen precision, but Marcus saw the tension in her jaw, the way her hands trembled slightly before she clenched them into fists. Inside the safety of her office, Victoria paced like a caged animal. Joanna stood by the windows reading headlines on her tablet with increasing dismay. The board had scheduled an emergency call for that afternoon. Victoria's voice came sharp, defensive. They have no right to judge my personal life. The company's performance speaks for itself. Joanna looked up with an expression mixing sympathy and pragmatism. They have every right when your personal choices affect stock prices. Fair or not, that's the reality. Marcus stood against the wall, trying to make himself small, aware that he was the problem. Everyone danced around naming directly. Victoria caught his eye and crossed to him, taking his hand despite Joanna's presence. Her words came fierce and certain. This is not your fault, Marcus. This is prejudice and classism masquerading as business concern. We'll weather this together. But the storm intensified through the week. More photographers appeared at Sienna's school trying to get pictures of the 7-year-old daughter of the driver dating Cleveland's most prominent CEO. The school's security chased them away, but not before Sienna saw the cameras and asked questions Marcus struggled to answer. Week 17 brought the confrontation he'd been dreading. Marcus picked Sienna up from school to find her eyes red from crying. Her usual brightness dimmed. She climbed into the car silently, and Marcus knew before asking that something had shattered her childhood innocence. He pulled into a parking lot and turned to face his daughter. What happened, baby girl? Her voice came small and wounded. Kids at school say you're with Miss Victoria for her money, that you're using her. That's not true, right, Daddy? Marcus felt his heart break and his anger rise in equal measure. He unbuckled and moved to the back seat, pulling Sienna into his lap like she was 3 instead of 7. No, baby, that's absolutely not true. I love Miss Victoria because she's kind and smart and brave. Because she sees me and you for who we really are. Sienna buried her face in his chest. Then why are people being mean? The question deserved an honest answer, even though the truth was ugly. Because some people don't understand that love is bigger than the skin. They see the differences, my skin color, her money, the jobs we have, and they can't imagine that two people might just love each other for real reasons. But their understanding doesn't matter, Sienna. What matters is the truth we know. She pulled back to look at him with those perceptive eyes. You really love her. Marcus nodded, certain of this, if nothing else. I really do. More than I thought I could love anyone after your mama died. Sienna processed this, then offered a tentative smile. Then we'll be brave like butterflies. They have to fight really hard to get out of their cocoons, but then they can fly. Marcus hugged his daughter tight, awed by her resilience and terrified by her vulnerability. That night, after she fell asleep, he stood on the fire escape and seriously considered ending things with Victoria. He could walk away, protect Sienna from the attention, go back to being invisible. The thought made his chest ache, but his daughter's well-being came before his happiness. Delilah found him there an hour later, having let herself in with the spare key he'd given her. She stood beside him in the cold without speaking for several minutes before delivering the truth he needed to hear. Her voice carried the weight of 7 decades of wisdom. "Baby, you're thinking about running. I can see it on your face. But you're teaching that girl something more important than protection right now. You're teaching her courage. You're showing her that love is worth fighting for even when the world makes it hard." Marcus shook his head, overwhelmed. "I can't let her suffer for my happiness, Miss Delilah. That's not fair to her." Delilah turned him to face, her hands firm on his shoulders. "Life's not fair, baby. That child knows that already. But what she's learning from watching you and Victoria is that dignity and love matter more than other people's opinions. That's a lesson worth some temporary discomfort." The words settled in Marcus's chest, reshaping his perspective. He was teaching Sienna something valuable: how to stand in truth even when truth was uncomfortable, how to choose love even when love was complicated, how to be bigger than the sky despite forces trying to make them small. But the pressure intensified from all sides. Harrison Caldwell, Victoria's board member, who'd made his coded racism clear from their first encounter, orchestrated a campaign that would have impressed Marcus with its ruthlessness if it hadn't been targeting his relationship. Conservative business media suddenly questioned Victoria's judgment. Major clients expressed concerns about leadership stability. Stock continued sliding 11% below its pre-scandal peak. The emergency board meeting happened on a Thursday afternoon with storm clouds gathering over Cleveland. Marcus drove Victoria to the office knowing she faced a choice that would define everything. Board Chair Grace Holloway had called her the night before with a private warning. The board was split, 4 members wanting Victoria to end the relationship, 3 supporting her autonomy, and Grace herself caught between loyalty and fiduciary duty. Marcus waited in the car while Victoria faced her accusers, aware that his presence in the building would only inflame tensions. 2 hours passed before his phone buzzed with her text, "Need you, now." He found her in her office, Joanna standing guard outside like a sentinel. Victoria stood by the windows, her back to the door, shoulders rigid with barely contained emotion. When she turned, her eyes were dry but furious. The words came clipped, controlled fury underneath. "Grace gave me an ultimatum. End things with you or face a vote of no confidence. They're framing it as fiduciary responsibility, but we both know what it really is." Marcus felt the floor drop from beneath him. "What did you tell her?" Victoria crossed to him, taking his face in both hands. "I told her that's not a choice I'm willing to make, that the company means nothing if I become someone who abandons people I love for profit margins and shareholder approval." The declaration should have felt triumphant, but Marcus saw the cost written in the tension around her eyes. "Victoria, you can't sacrifice everything you've built for." She cut him off with a kiss, fierce and definitive. "For you, for us, for the kind of life where I get to be happy instead of just successful. Watch me." But Marcus understood business in ways that made him pragmatic, even when his heart wanted to accept her grand gesture. That night, after taking Sienna home and tucking her in, he returned to Victoria's penthouse with a decision that tasted like ashes. He found the words despite how much they hurt. "I'll resign, step back, give you space to rebuild the board's confidence without the distraction of." Victoria's response came immediate and heated. "Don't you dare finish that sentence. This isn't a distraction, Marcus. This is my life choosing to be about more than quarterly reports and market share." Marcus paced her living room, frustration and love warring inside him. "But Sienna's being hurt. Your company's suffering. At some point, the cost becomes too high." Victoria followed him, matching his movement. "And what's the cost of living the half-life, of being successful but hollow, of dying alone in this sterile penthouse because I was too afraid to fight for something real?" Her words struck deep because Marcus had been living exactly that half-life since Natalie died, existing for Sienna's sake, but not truly living until Victoria had reminded him what connection felt like. But protecting his daughter's innocence still felt more important than his happiness. The impasse settled between them, neither willing to concede. Victoria's phone rang with Grace Holloway's number, and she answered on speaker. Grace's voice came weary, sympathetic. "Victoria, the board voted 4-3 in favor of requiring your choice. Marcus or the company. You have 48 hours to decide." "I'm sorry." The call ended and Victoria hurled her phone at the couch with uncharacteristic violence. They're forcing me to choose between love and legacy like they're mutually exclusive, like I can't have both. Out. Marcus pulled her into his arms, feeling her shake with rage and grief. Maybe there's another way. Maybe we don't have to choose between love and your company. Maybe we make them choose you. Victoria pulled back, searching his face. What are you suggesting? An idea had been forming during 4 months of tracking operational improvements, analyzing inefficiencies, understanding the company's financial mechanics better than anyone except Victoria herself. Marcus had data, had proof of value added, had numbers that spoke louder than prejudice. His response came steady, certain. You said I'm good at seeing patterns others miss. I've been tracking operational improvements for months. Scheduling optimization saved 85,000. Route efficiency saved 42,000. The vendor consolidation I suggested is projected to save 127,000 annually. Total impact 254,000 in year one, projected 890,000 over 3 years. Victoria's eyes widened as she followed his logic. You're proposing we present your value to the board. Make you indispensable on merit. Marcus nodded, the plan crystallizing. I'm not just your driver who you happen to love. I'm someone who's been making the company better since day one. Present me for a VP operations role. Make it competitive if you have to. Let me prove I deserve to be here regardless of our relationship. Victoria's expression shifted through doubt to hope to determination. They'll say I'm giving you preferential treatment, that this is nepotism. Marcus smiled grimly. Then we make it clean. Board approves a provisional VP operations position. I compete against external candidates. Best proposal wins. If I earn it, nobody can claim it's about our relationship. Victoria studied him with something like awe. You're willing to risk public rejection to prove yourself. His response came simple and sure. I've been risking rejection my whole life just by existing as a black man in spaces that don't expect me. At least this time I have evidence and expertise on my side. They spent the next 48 hours preparing. Marcus pulled together every piece of analysis he'd done, every improvement he'd suggested, every dollar saved, an hour optimized. Victoria arranged the board meeting, framing it as a presentation on operational efficiency before they voted on her ultimatum. The night before the presentation, Marcus sat at his kitchen table while Sienna slept, reviewing slides and rehearsing arguments. His hands shook slightly, aware that tomorrow would determine everything: his career, his relationship, his daughter's stability. Sienna appeared in the doorway, butterfly nightlight casting shadows behind her. Daddy, why are you still awake? Marcus opened his arms and she climbed into his lap, warm and trusting. Working on something important, baby girl. Something that might change our lives. She studied his face with those perceptive eyes. Are you scared? Honesty felt important, so Marcus nodded. Terrified. Sienna's response came certain, repeating the mantra he'd taught her. You'll be good, Daddy. Bigger than the sky, remember. Marcus held his daughter close, drawing strength from her faith in him. Bigger than the sky, Sienna. Bigger than the sky. What Marcus didn't know, sitting in his small kitchen, holding his daughter while Cleveland slept around them, was that Harrison Caldwell was preparing his own presentation. Evidence gathered and spun, narrative crafted to destroy one final attempt to break the man who dared to love above his station and the woman who chose dignity over easy conformity. The board meeting would be war. Only one side would emerge intact. The boardroom occupied the entire 48th floor, glass walls offering panoramic views of Cleveland that made the city look conquerable from this height. Marcus arrived 30 minutes early, carrying a leather portfolio Victoria had given him the night before. Inside, 47 pages of analysis backed by spreadsheets that transformed 4 months of observation into irrefutable data. The board members filtered in at 9:50 for the 10 o'clock meeting. Grace Holloway entered, first, 60 years old, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had witnessed decades of corporate warfare. She nodded at Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read, sympathy mixed with steel, perhaps. Bennett Whitmore followed, 54, and perpetually concerned about optics over substance. 3 other members Marcus recognized from company materials, but had never met, arrived in efficient succession. Harrison Caldwell entered last, carrying his own portfolio with the confidence of someone holding winning cards. At 61, he embodied old money, Cleveland Yale-educated country club membership inherited through 3 generations, the kind of man who believed the world owed him deference simply for existing in it. His eyes found Marcus and registered satisfaction that made Marcus's stomach tighten. Victoria sat at the head of the table, platinum hair, severe in its professional styling navy suit armor, against whatever came next. Her face revealed nothing, but Marcus caught the slight tremor in her fingers as she opened her laptop. 4 months together had taught him to read the micro-expressions she hid from everyone else. Grace called the meeting to order with formal precision. We're here to address the board's concerns regarding Ms. Ashford's relationship with her employee, Marcus Holloway. Before we proceed to the vote of no confidence, Ms. Ashford has requested a time to present operational improvements Mr. Holloway has implemented. Victoria, you have the floor. Victoria stood, but Caldwell's voice cut through before she could speak. If I may, Madam Chair, I believe context is necessary before we discuss operational matters. I've prepared documentation that sheds light on Mr. Holloway's background and motivations. Grace's jaw tightened with disapproval, but parliamentary procedure gave Caldwell the right to present. 5 minutes, Harrison. Make it count. Caldwell stood, triggering the room's display screen with practiced ease. The first slide showed Marcus's employment application from 4 months ago, personal information he'd provided in confidence, now weaponized for public examination. Caldwell's voice carried the faux concern of someone delivering bad news with hidden pleasure. Marcus Holloway, age 34, single father. Previous employment, Mercer and Associates, terminated 9 months before applying here. Notable detail, his application lists an eviction notice served 6 days before his interview with Ms. Ashford. The slide changed to show a photographed document, Marcus's actual eviction notice, the bright orange paper marking his desperation like a scarlet letter. Heat flooded Marcus's face, but he kept his expression neutral and hands steady on the portfolio. Caldwell continued his assassination with surgical precision. Bank balance at time of hire $94.37. Rent arrears $925. 68 job applications filed in 9 months with 0 offers. This is a man who was by any definition desperate. Another slide, a timeline starting with Marcus's hire date. Notice the progression. Week 1 hired as driver at $120,000 annually, more than triple what executive drivers typically earn in this market. Week 8 offered consulting role, adding $25,000 to his salary. Week 12 begins romantic relationship with his employer. Week 16 relationship becomes public. Week 18 proposed for VP operations role with salary exceeding $200,000. Caldwell paused for effect, letting the timeline speak its damning narrative. Gentlemen, this is a textbook case of opportunistic advancement. A desperate man identified a vulnerable target, our CEO isolated and overworked, and executed a calculated strategy to secure financial stability through romantic entanglement. Marcus felt each word land like a physical blow, not because they were true, but because they sounded plausible. The evidence Caldwell presented was factual. Only the interpretation twisted truth into weapon. Bennett Whitmore shifted uncomfortably. Harrison, these are serious allegations. You're suggesting Mr. Holloway deliberately seduced Ms. Ashford for financial gain. Caldwell's response came smooth, rehearsed. I'm presenting facts and allowing this board to draw obvious conclusions. A man facing homelessness, suddenly earning significant salary, and positioned for executive promotion after initiating a relationship with his employer. The pattern speaks for itself. Victoria stood abruptly, color high in her cheeks. This is character assassination, Harrison. Marcus earned every opportunity through demonstrated competence. Caldwell cut her off with false gentleness. Victoria, darling, nobody questions your intentions. But this board has a fiduciary duty to protect you from unfortunate influences. Mr. Holloway may have charmed you, but the evidence suggests calculated manipulation rather than genuine affection. Marcus watched the board members' faces, seeing doubt take root even among those previously sympathetic. Caldwell had crafted a narrative that explained everything through the lens of cynicism, easier to believe than the messier truth that 2 lonely people had found genuine connection. Grace Holloway's voice cut through the tension. Mr. Holloway, you're entitled to respond to these allegations. Marcus stood, aware that the next minutes would determine everything. His hands remained steady despite his racing heart, the calm he'd cultivated through 4 years of single parenting and 9 months of unemployment serving him now. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet dignity his mother had taught him was the only armor that mattered. The words came measured, honest, refusing the bait of defensiveness. Mr. Caldwell is correct about one thing. I was desperate. $94 in my account. 6 days from eviction. A 7-year-old daughter who deserved better than watching her father fail. I took this job because I was terrified and out of options. He paused, meeting each board member's eyes in turn. But desperation doesn't equal manipulation. Yes, I needed the salary. Yes, I worked harder than any driver you'd had before because I couldn't afford to fail. But everything I've accomplished since every improvement I've suggested, every efficiency I've identified, every dollar I've saved this company, I earned through competence, not charm. Marcus gestured to his portfolio. Mr. Caldwell wants you to believe I seduced Victoria for financial gain. That's a convenient narrative that lets you avoid confronting something more uncomfortable, that a black man in a service role might actually possess skills and intelligence that justify advancement, that he might deserve respect and opportunity based on merit rather than manipulation. The temperature in the room shifted, several board members looking uncomfortable. Marcus pressed his advantage, keeping his tone measured, but letting truth ring clear. His voice gained strength without volume. I fell in love with Victoria because she's brilliant and kind and brave enough to choose integrity over easy profit. She fell in love with me, if she'll forgive me speaking for her, because I see her as a human being rather than a revenue generator. Our relationship developed naturally over 4 months of working together, finding common ground in loneliness and hope. If that makes me an opportunist, then everyone who's ever found love through proximity is equally guilty. Victoria stood beside him, a united front. Marcus is here to present evidence of value he's added to this company. I ask that you judge his proposal on merit rather than prejudice disguised as concern. Grace nodded slowly. Mr. Holloway, please proceed with your presentation. Marcus triggered his first slide, and the screen filled with data that transformed abstract accusations into concrete results. His voice shifted to the analytical precision that had made him successful at Mercer and Associates, numbers and patterns his native language. The presentation unfolded with methodical clarity. Over 4 months, I've analyzed Ashford Technologies' operational framework and identified systematic inefficiencies across multiple departments. My recommendations, implemented with Ms. Ashford's approval, have generated measurable results. Slide 2, scheduling optimization. Executive calendar analysis revealed clustering failures that created redundant travel. By reorganizing meeting sequences geographically and temporally, we've saved 6.3 hours weekly. Annualized value $85,000 in recovered executive productivity. Slide 3, route efficiency. Driver route analysis across all company vehicles showed poor optimization. Implementation of routing software reduced fuel costs and time wastage. Annual savings $42,000. Marcus continued through vendor consolidation, office space utilization, and HR process automation. Each slide presented problem identification, solution implementation, and quantified results. The board members leaned forward, grudging interest replacing skepticism. Slide 10, comprehensive summary. Total realized savings in year 1, $254,000. Projected 3-year impact, $1.2 million. Return on investment for my salary and consulting fees, 437%. Bennett Whitmore's eyebrows rose. These numbers are verified, Victoria responded with crisp authority, independently audited by our financial team. Every claim Marcus makes is documented and substantiated. Marcus advanced to his final slide, feeling the moment crystallize around him. I understand the board's concern about perception, about whether my promotion represents merit or favoritism. So I propose this: approve a provisional VP operations role for 6 months. I'll compete against external candidates if you require. Evaluate me solely on deliverables and results. If I meet 70% of projected savings targets, the position becomes permanent. If not, I resign with no severance and no drama. The offer hung in the air, bold enough to demonstrate confidence, reasonable enough to address concerns about nepotism. Grace studied Marcus with new assessment, seeing perhaps what Victoria had seen months ago, a capable professional who'd been invisible because his job title suggested he should be. Marcus reached into his portfolio and withdrew a single sheet of paper, placing copies before each board member. My credentials: Marcus Holloway, certified public accountant, senior accountant at Mercer & Associates, 2014 through 2023. Specialized in operational efficiency and cost reduction. Successfully managed portfolios worth $240 to $680 million. Oh, and for 4 months, your driver. The reveal landed with satisfying impact. Several board members blinked in surprise, while Caldwell's face reddened with rage at having his narrative disrupted by inconvenient facts. Marcus had never hidden his background. He simply hadn't advertised credentials when applying for a driving position that required none. Grace's voice carried new respect. Mr. Holloway, why didn't you mention your CPA certification when you applied? Marcus's response came simple and devastating. Because I was applying to drive cars, Madam Chair. The position required a clean license and reliability, both of which I possessed. My accounting credentials were irrelevant to the job. I didn't hide my past, I just didn't think it mattered until Ms. Ashford asked me to consult on operations. Victoria's turn now, and she stood with a commanding presence that had made her legendary in boardrooms. Gentlemen, since we're sharing documentation, I have some of my own. She triggered the screen, and Harrison Caldwell's face appeared in a photograph taken outside Sienna's school. The timestamp showed last week. Another photo, Caldwell on his phone, reporters visible in the background approaching the building. Victoria's voice carried ice that made her old nickname suddenly fitting. Harrison, you sent reporters to a 7-year-old child's school. You coordinated a harassment campaign targeting Marcus's daughter to pressure us into ending our relationship. Caldwell's composure cracked. That's circumstantial. Victoria advanced another slide, email headers showing communication between Caldwell and a tabloid journalist. You leaked Marcus's confidential employment records to the media. That's illegal under both federal and state privacy laws. Our legal team has already filed complaints with the appropriate authorities. Another slide, phone records showing calls between Caldwell and 2 of the clients who'd paused contracts with Ashford Technologies. You orchestrated the client pressure campaign, convinced business partners to withdraw based on manufactured concerns about leadership stability. The evidence accumulated with prosecutorial precision. Caldwell had broken laws, violated ethics, and conspired to destroy a relationship because his prejudice couldn't tolerate his CEO loving someone he deemed beneath her. The other board members shifted uncomfortably, realizing they'd been manipulated into doing Caldwell's dirty work. Grace Holloway's expression had transformed from conflicted to furious. Harrison, these allegations, if proven, represent grounds for immediate removal and potential criminal charges. What do you have to say? Caldwell stood, attempting to salvage dignity from wreckage. This is a witch hunt. Victoria is deflecting from her own poor judgment by attacking me. Grace cut him off with authority honed through decades of corporate governance. You targeted a child, Harrison. Whatever justification you've constructed for yourself, you cross lines that cannot be uncrossed. I move for your immediate suspension from this board pending legal investigation. The motion carried with brutal efficiency, 4 votes in favor, 1 opposed, 2 abstentions from members too shocked to commit. Caldwell gathered his materials with shaking hands, his carefully constructed attack having destroyed his own position rather than Marcus's. As he reached the door, Marcus spoke for the first time since his presentation ended. Mr. Caldwell, I want you to understand something. I didn't seduce Victoria for financial security. I fell in love with a remarkable woman who happened to be my employer. Your inability to imagine that possibility says more about your limitations than my motivations. Caldwell didn't respond, but his shoulders hunched as he left the door, closing behind him with finality. Grace turned back to the remaining board. We still have the matter of Mr. Holloway's proposed position to address. Given the evidence presented, I move to approve provisional VP operations for 6 months. Compensation package commensurate with role evaluation based solely on deliverable results. Success triggers permanent appointment. Failure results in return to driver position at current salary, no termination, no reduction in benefits already earned. The compromise protected everyone's interests while giving Marcus genuine opportunity to prove himself. Bennett Whitmore seconded, and discussion began in earnest. Marcus sat silently, allowing his work to speak. The vote came 20 minutes later, 6 in favor, 1 opposed from a member who remained unconvinced despite evidence. Grace announced the result with something approaching warmth. Congratulations, Mr. Holloway. Welcome to the executive team. Don't make me regret this. Marcus stood and extended his hand across the table. Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't disappoint you. Victoria's smile could have powered the city, relief and pride and love, all visible in her expression. Joanna, who'd been listening from outside, entered with paperwork already prepared, standard VP contract benefits, package office assignment, on the 47th floor with views almost as good as Victoria's. The meeting adjourned, board members filing out with varying expressions of approval and reservation. Grace lingered, waiting until only she and Marcus and Victoria remained. Her voice carried weight earned through experience. Marcus, I've known Victoria since she was 16 years old. Her father was my mentor and friend. I promised him I'd protect this company and protect his daughter. Today I choose both. You've earned this opportunity through merit. Don't let prejudice from inside or outside convince you otherwise. Marcus felt unexpected emotion tighten his throat. I appreciate your faith in me, Madam Chair. I'll justify it. Grace turned to Victoria with an expression mixing affection and warning. And you, young lady, you've chosen a difficult path. The market will punish this relationship regardless of how well Marcus performs. Are you prepared for that reality? Victoria took Marcus's hand without hesitation. I'm prepared to fight for what matters. The market's short-term reactions don't define long-term success. We'll prove that together. Grace nodded satisfied and left them alone in the boardroom with its panoramic views and the weight of what they'd just accomplished. Victoria turned to Marcus, eyes bright with unshed tears. You were magnificent. Every word, every slide, every moment. You didn't just defend us, you made them see your value independently. Marcus pulled her close, aware that victory came with complications still to navigate. Caldwell's gone, but his sentiment isn't. We've won the battle, not the war. Her response came fierce against his chest. Then we keep fighting. Together. The following week brought media frenzy as news of Marcus's promotion and Caldwell's removal spread through Cleveland's business community. Headlines shifted from sensationalism to grudging respect. Stock rebounded 7% as investors recognized that leadership willing to challenge prejudice and reward competence might actually strengthen the company. Two clients who'd paused contracts resumed negotiations, attracted rather than repelled by the narrative of merit-based advancement. Marcus moved into his new office on a Monday morning, carrying the few possessions that marked his professional life: CPA certification, Sienna's drawings, a photo of Natalie holding their newborn daughter 4 years before death claimed her. The space felt surreal, a corner office with windows and furniture that cost more than his monthly rent used to be. Joanna appeared in the doorway with a tablet and amused expression. Your first day as VP Operations officially begins with 17 emails requiring response, 3 meetings Victoria scheduled, and a lunch with the finance team who want to understand your methodology. Welcome to executive life. Marcus laughed, slightly overwhelmed. I went from driving people to meetings to being the person in meetings. The irony isn't lost on me. Joanna's smile softened with genuine affection. For what it's worth, I've watched Victoria for 4 years. I've never seen her this happy or this human. Whatever you two have, it's good for both of you. 6 months passed in a blur of operational improvements, cost reductions, and systematic changes that transformed how Ashford Technologies functioned. Marcus's team grew to include 12 analysts and project managers, each one selected through rigorous interviews that prioritized competence over connections. The culture shifted subtly but measurably. Merit mattered more than pedigree, results spoke louder than reputation. The 6-month review arrived in September with Autumn painting Cleveland in gold and crimson. Marcus presented his results to the full board, with Victoria abstaining to avoid conflict of interest. The numbers spoke their own language. Year 1 realized savings $391,000, 93% of projected targets. Employee satisfaction scores up 34% in departments Marcus had restructured. Client retention improved 12% after operational improvements reduced service delivery time. 3 major efficiency initiatives implemented ahead of schedule and under budget. Grace Holloway studied the comprehensive report, then looked at Marcus with satisfaction that approached vindication. Mr. Holloway, it appears we made the right choice. I move to convert your provisional appointment to permanent VP Operations. Any objections? Silence. Even the board member who'd voted against Marcus's appointment nodded approval. The vote carried unanimously. Marcus was permanent, undeniable, proven through results that transcended any narrative about opportunism or manipulation. That night, Victoria and Marcus celebrated at her penthouse with Sienna invited for the first time to an adult's evening. The little girl, now 8 years old and losing her gap-toothed smile to permanent teeth, sat between them on the couch while they ordered pizza and watched nature documentaries about butterflies. Sienna's observation came during a segment about metamorphosis. Miss Victoria, are you and Daddy gonna get married? The question froze both adults mid-bite. Victoria recovered, first setting down her pizza to face Sienna directly. Would that make you happy? Sienna's response came certain wise beyond her years. Yes, you love each other. I can see it. And love bigger than the sky should get to be official. Marcus felt his throat tighten at his daughter paraphrasing their mantra back to them. Victoria's eyes met his across Sienna's head, asking permission and offering promise in a single glance. His nod was slight but definitive. Victoria turned back to Sienna with a smile that transformed her entire face. Then yes, sweetheart, your daddy and I are going to get married, if he'll have me. Marcus laughed, pulling both of them close. I think that can be arranged. 18 months after Marcus had taken the job, No one wanted, he stood at the altar in Cleveland's Botanical Gardens, wearing a charcoal suit that fit perfectly because Victoria had insisted on tailoring. The ceremony took place in the Butterfly Conservatory on a June afternoon, when the natural butterfly season filled the air with wings and color. Hundreds of monarchs and swallowtails fluttered around them, drawn by the flowers arranged throughout the space. Sienna served as maid of honor, resplendent in purple, and carrying a basket of flower petals she'd insisted be butterfly-shaped. Delilah Warren walked Victoria down the aisle, the retired nurse having become grandmother to them all. Grace Holloway officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this occasion. 40 guests filled the conservatory, Joanna and her family colleagues from Ashford Technologies, Sienna's teacher, the small circle of people who'd supported them through scandal and triumph. Caldwell's absence went unmentioned, but not unnoticed. He'd faced civil penalties for privacy violations and resigned from 3 corporate boards, his reputation destroyed by his own prejudice. Victoria wore cream silk that caught afternoon light, her platinum hair styled in soft waves that made her look simultaneously elegant and approachable. When Marcus saw her approaching through the butterflies, his eyes filled with tears he didn't bother hiding. They'd written their own vows, and Marcus spoke his first. "Victoria, you saw me when I was invisible. Not the driver, not the desperate father, but the man underneath trying to maintain dignity through impossible circumstances. You gave me opportunity to prove myself, and then you gave me something more valuable, permission to be fully human, to want things beyond survival, to love without fear. I promise to see you with the same clarity every day of our lives, to remind you that success isn't measured in stock prices, but in moments of genuine connection. To build a life with you that honors both ambition and joy. You are my partner in everything." Victoria's vows came with the precision she brought to boardrooms, but softened by emotion that made her voice waver. "Marcus, you showed me that strength isn't armor, it's vulnerability. That leadership means choosing integrity even when profit beckons. That love isn't weakness, but the bravest choice we make. You and Sienna have given me a family I didn't know I was missing. You've made me better, not just better at running a company, but better at being human. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to fight for us with the same determination I bring to business, to remember that this us matters more than anything else I'll ever build." Grace pronounced them married, and Marcus kissed his wife while butterflies danced around them, and Sienna cheered, and Delilah dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. The moment felt impossible and perfect, 2 people from different worlds creating something entirely their own. The reception lasted until sunset painted the conservatory in amber and gold. Marcus danced with Victoria, then with Sienna, then with Delilah, who told him his mother would have been proud. Grace Holloway offered a toast about courage and merit and choosing love over fear. Joanna gave a speech that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. When the formal program ended and guests mingled over cake and champagne, Sienna tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Daddy, I need to tell you something." He knelt beside her, aware that his daughter had been unusually quiet during the reception. "What is it, baby girl?" She pulled a folded paper from her dress pocket. "I wrote something for school about people who inspire me. Mrs. Martinez said it was really good. I want to read it to you and Victoria." Marcus called Victoria over, and they found a quiet corner while Sienna unfolded her paper. Her voice came clear and certain as she read. "My parents taught me that the world will try to make you small. People will judge you by your job or your skin color or who you love. But love makes you bigger than fear. My daddy and Victoria didn't just fall in love. They fought for it. When mean people said Daddy was only with Victoria for money, he proved them wrong by being really good at his job. When the board tried to make Victoria choose between Daddy and her company, she said she could have both. They showed me that dignity matters more than other people's approval. That merit is real even when prejudice tries to hide it. That family is who you choose, not just who you're born to. They changed our corner of the world, and they taught me that our love really is bigger than the sky." Marcus felt tears blur his vision, overwhelmed by his daughter's wisdom and the truth she'd extracted from their complicated journey. Victoria's hand found his squeezing gently, her own eyes wet. Sienna looked up expectantly. "Is that good?" Victoria pulled her close voice thick with emotion. "That's perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect." The evening drew toward its end, and Marcus and Victoria slipped away from the reception to the conservatory's overlook, the same vantage point where they could see the city lights beginning to emerge as dusk deepened. They stood with arms around each other, Sienna between them, having followed, because she refused to be left out of important moments. Victoria's voice came soft, reflective. "What are you thinking?" Marcus looked at his daughter, then at the woman he'd married, then out at the city that had witnessed their transformation. That I took a go out no one wanted and found a life everyone dreams of. Not because it was handed to me, because we built it together choice by choice, refusing to be smaller than the sky. Victoria rested her head on his shoulder. We changed, didn't we, both of us? You're not just surviving anymore. I'm not just succeeding. Marcus kissed her temple, tasting salt from tears she'd shed during Sienna's reading. We're living, finally actually living. Sienna stirred between them, looking up with sleepy contentment. Daddy, can we come back here to see the butterflies? Marcus smiled, understanding that his daughter wanted to preserve this moment to make it repeatable rather than singular. Whenever you want, baby girl, this is our place now. The city lights reflected in the glass walls around them, creating constellations that rivaled the darkening sky. Marcus thought about the eviction notice that had driven him to apply for an impossible job, about Victoria's loneliness masked by success, about Sienna's gap-toothed smile trusting him to build something better, about Caldwell's prejudice that had tried to break them and instead revealed their strength. They'd won. Not through luck or manipulation, but through competence and courage and refusing to accept that love had limitations. Marcus Holloway, driver, accountant, father, husband, VP, had proven that merit transcended circumstances. That dignity was a choice available to everyone. That love, when fought for with integrity, really could be bigger than the sky. The story would become legend at Ashford Technologies, told to new employees as proof that the company valued substance over surface. The Natalie Holloway Memorial Scholarship, established with the first profits from Marcus's operational improvements, would fund 12 students annually, each one selected for potential rather than pedigree. But for Marcus, standing in the Butterfly Conservatory on his wedding day with his family complete around him, the real victory was simpler. He'd found his way home. Not to a place, but to people. To belonging. To the radical notion that a black single father and a white billionaire CEO could build something beautiful together, despite every force trying to keep them apart. Victoria's whisper came against his shoulder. Thank you. He turned to look at her, confused. For what? Her smile held everything they'd been through and everything yet to come. For being brave enough to see me, for teaching me that the best things in life are worth fighting for showing me what it means to be bigger than the schema. Marcus pulled his wife and daughter close, three people who'd found each other against impossible odds and chosen to build something that mattered. The butterflies settled around them as darkness completed its claim on the day wings, folding in rest after their own transformations. In choosing each other, they'd chosen the hardest path and the most rewarding one. They'd shown anyone paying attention that love grounded in respect and partnership could transform everything it touched. Not just companies or careers, but hearts and futures in the small corner of the world they called theirs. Their love was bigger than the sky, and it always would be.